when we're thinking of revitalization, we always have to remember the context of the church. All over Europe, churches are in different contexts, and I would say there are three types of contexts that they have to think of. The first is the historical context, and I sometimes make a distinction between churches which are more in Northern Europe, Scandinavia, UK, Germany, where sometimes churches which have been in existence for a long time, maybe centuries, need some kind of revitalization. Whereas in Central and Eastern Europe, the history is that a lot of people became Christians after the fall of the Soviet regime, and suddenly about 10, 15 years ago, the Western mindset, materialism, postmodernity, came to these countries, and the flow of conversions slowed up, and they need a different type of revitalization. Whereas in Southern Europe, it's very often the churches which were planted, let's say, in the last century, often in the 70s, 80s, for example, need revitalization because they were planted but didn't take on board the need to pass on to the next generation. So there is a historical context of revitalization. Geographically, that is also something that needs to be taken into account, because sometimes a church building can no longer be in the right place. What I mean by that is an area of the city might change. It may be a church mainly made up of Europeans in an area where there are mostly immigrants, for example. And so sometimes either you say, well, let's try to adapt the church to this new context, or give the church building to an African church, for example, or maybe sell the building and move to a place which is more adapted to the congregation. So geography is also a context. And more widely than that, there's the cultural context. In the 40 years that I've been a pastor, we've moved from modernity to postmodernity. When I started, debates were still possible. I remember even when I was a student debating with all sorts of types of Marxists with the University Christian Union, where everyone thought they had the answer, whereas today no one thinks they do have the answer in the postmodern world. And if you come saying, we've got the answer, then people are suspicious of you. They're going to think you're trying to impose something. So this cultural context also has to be taken into mind and borne in mind as we think how we're preaching, how we're evangelizing, and so on. So these are the different aspects of the context that we have to bear in mind in revitalization.